You ever have a moment where the air changes? Like something in the atmosphere just breaks? That was me, standing in the middle of a ballroom full of lawyers and polished handshakes, realizing my wife had just humiliated me in front of everyone we know. It was the Hallstrom and Grant year-end gala. Black tie, catered, every inch of the place dripping in ego. The kind of event where no one's actually having fun, but they'll all pretend like it's the highlight of the year. A room full of sharks in suits, sipping wine and trading compliments sharp enough to draw blood. I'd been planted at the bar with a client, walking him through a contract clause he clearly didn't understand but was too proud to admit it. I was in my element, composed, focused, the kind of guy who knew how to talk in circles while sounding like he was saying something profound. That's what the job had made me into. I didn't hate it. Then I heard her. Emily. Her voice cut through the music and clinking glasses like a champagne flute shattering on marble. She was across the room, surrounded by partners and their polished spouses, all teeth and thin laughter. She leaned in toward the circle, raised her glass, and with that signature smirk, the one that used to be flirtatious when it was just us, she said it. Mark still alphabetizes our spice rack, like he's drafting a merger agreement. It was the kind of line meant to seem cute, harmless, relatable. The crowd erupted. The men chuckled. The women gave that overperformed gasp and giggle combo. Someone called out, "Classic Mark," like it was some sitcom catchphrase. But it landed differently. It wasn't the words. It was her tone. The performative delight. The precision of it. She knew what she was doing. And I knew it too. In that moment, I didn't smile because I was amused. I smiled because I finally understood the game we were playing, or rather, the game she'd been playing while I was busy trying to keep our lives glued together. I raised my glass to her across the room, slow and steady, locking eyes with her like it was a private toast. She faltered, just for a second, a blink too long. Then she looked away. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not broke, not exactly. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something colder, sharper, like a window had opened in my chest and let the winter air in. I wasn't embarrassed. I wasn't sad. I was done. Done with pretending. Done with being the reliable husband who plays along. Done being polite when she took her little jabs in front of friends and smiled like they didn't mean anything. The strange part? No one else noticed it. To them, the night moved on. Laughter picked back up. Music filled the air again. People returned to their conversations like nothing had happened. But for me, everything had shifted. I watched her for the rest of the evening. Not like a husband watching his wife, but like someone studying a stranger they used to know. The way she moved through the room, effortless, confident, always saying just enough but never too much. She looked beautiful. Of course she did. Emily always knew how to dress for the K*LL. But there was something in her smile that felt off, performed, too wide, like she was playing a role she wasn't sure she could keep up much longer. She caught me watching her once, just once. She tilted her head, gave me that charming little smirk, the one that used to mean, "Let's get out of here," but now just felt hollow. I smiled back, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't a smile she recognized. The night dragged on. Speeches, toasts, more networking than anyone could stomach. I barely heard any of it. My mind was a loop, playing back that moment, her voice slicing through the room, the crowd laughing at my expense. And all I could think about was how many other times she'd done it in smaller ways. The subtle digs, the sarcastic remarks when I brought up things I cared about. The way she rolled her eyes when I tried to explain my work to her friends like I was being arrogant for existing. It wasn't just the spice rack. It was 100 little moments that now snapped into focus like pieces of a puzzle I didn't know I was building. Maybe that's what betrayal actually feels like. Not a big explosion, but a quiet realization that someone's been cutting you down 1 inch at a time while convincing you to smile through it. When the gala finally started winding down, I made the rounds, shook hands, exchanged thank yous, played the part. Emily stayed on the other side of the room most of the time, laughing a little too hard at someone's joke, holding her glass just a little too long. I didn't bother going to her. I didn't pull her aside to ask what the hell that was earlier. There was no point. Something had shifted, and I don't think either of us could unshift it. Later that night, in the Uber ride home, the silence between us was deafening. She scrolled through her phone like nothing had happened. I stared out the window, watching the city blur by. When we pulled into our driveway, she looked up at me and asked, "You okay?" I nodded once, flat. "Sure." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Neither of us spoke as we got inside. She slipped off her heels, wandered into the kitchen, probably looking for a snack or a glass of wine. I went upstairs, sat at the edge of the bed, untied my shoes slower than necessary, just trying to feel grounded, trying to feel anything. The house was quiet, and I realized how unfamiliar that silence felt. Not peaceful, not int asterisk mate, just cold, empty. Eventually, she came up too, still pretending everything was normal. She brushed her teeth, made some offhand comment about how tired she was, climbed into bed like she hadn't just gutted me in public a few hours earlier. I slid under the covers beside her, staring at the ceiling. She didn't reach for me, didn't even say goodnight, and I didn't care. That was the moment I knew. Whatever we had, whatever I thought we were, it had started to rot long before tonight. And now, finally, I could smell it. The next morning, I was up before the sun. Not because I had anywhere to be. I just couldn't stay in that house another second. I moved slowly through the bedroom, careful not to wake her. Emily was still asleep, her back to me, curled in the same way she always did when she wanted distance. A week ago, I might have stared at her a little longer, wondered what she was dreaming about, tried to summon some memory that still made me feel connected to her. But that morning I felt nothing. No anger, no heartbreak, just this numbness. I didn't make coffee, didn't bother with a note. I just pulled on a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and slipped out the front door before the sky had even started to lighten. The air was sharp, the kind that clings to your lungs and reminds you you're still alive. I drove without thinking, letting the city pass me by in a blur of frost-covered streets and blinking traffic lights. Eventually, I found myself heading south, toward a part of town I hadn't been to in years. The buildings got older. The pavement got rougher. The GPS on my dash kept recalculating, like even it wasn't sure where I was going. But I knew. Tucked behind a shuttered auto shop and a faded laundromat, the place was still there. Joe's Boxing and Fitness, scrawled in chipping red paint across the front window. I sat in the car for a minute, engine idling, just staring at the sign. The last time I'd walked through that door, I was 19 and cocky, convinced I could punch my way out of grief after my dad died. I hadn't been back since. Inside, nothing had changed. Same cracked mirrors. Same ancient leather bags hanging from rusted chains. The air smelled like sweat and rubber and something else. Something raw, almost holy. There was a radio playing low in the corner, some old rock station crackling with static. A guy behind the desk looked up when I walked in. He was older now, broader around the middle, beard flecked with gray, but I recognized him instantly. "Mark," he said, squinting. "No sh*T. "Hey, Tony," I said. My voice sounded foreign in my own ears. "Damn, man. Been a minute." 15 years, I said. "Give or take." He whistled. "What brings you back?" Could have lied. Said I was looking to get in shape, K***l time, find a new hobby. But I didn't have the energy for spin. "Needed somewhere that doesn't lie to me," I said. Tony nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. He tossed me a set of wraps and pointed toward the far end of the gym. "Gloves are in the bin. Bag's yours." The second my knuckles hit the heavy bag, something ancient cracked open inside me. The pain was immediate. I hadn't wrapped my hands properly, and my form was garbage. But it didn't matter. Every strike sent a jolt through my arms, through my chest, through the hollow space inside me I hadn't been able to name until now. I didn't count rounds. I didn't watch the clock. I just kept hitting until my arms turned to rubber and my shirt clung to my back like a second skin. When I finally stopped, chest heaving, I pressed my forehead to the bag and closed my eyes. It wasn't about anger. It wasn't about revenge. It was about proving to myself that I still had something in me that wasn't dead. Afterward, Tony handed me a towel and a bottle of water. I sat on the bench outside the locker room, hands trembling, heart still thudding in my ears. He didn't ask questions. Just sat beside me and lit a cigarette, offering me one without looking. I didn't take it. I didn't come here to run away, I said quietly. I came to start something. Tony nodded. Good. Then don't stop showing up. I stayed there for another hour, just breathing, letting the cold air soak into my bones. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't thinking about work or Emily or the list of things I had to pretend I cared about. I was just there, present, bruised maybe, but real. Driving home, I didn't turn on the radio. I needed the silence. When I pulled into the driveway, Emily's car was still there. Lights on in the kitchen. I sat in the car for a few minutes, watching her shadow move across the window. She was on the phone. Probably her sister, maybe one of her friends, and I realized I didn't care who it was. I didn't care what she was saying. I went inside, walked past her without a word, straight into the shower. I let the water scald me, watched the grime and sweat swirl down the drain, and felt something start to peel away. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be the same man I'd been yesterday. Let me know how that landed. If you want more tension, more introspection, more dialogue. It started with the body. I went back to the gym the next morning. Then the next. I didn't say much to Tony, and he didn't push it. Just nodded when I came in, threw me a towel and let me work. The punches got cleaner. My form tightened up. The pain in my shoulders and forearms started to feel like something earned. Something honest. Every drop of sweat was a rebellion. Every bruise a record of something I'd carried too long. There was something cathartic about hurting the right way. Not in that dull, quiet way you do when you sleep next to someone you don't trust anymore. Not the kind of pain you talk yourself out of. This was different. Simple. Direct. My fists hit leather and the world made sense for 60 seconds at a time. I didn't talk to Emily about the gym. Hell, we barely talked at all. She'd ask how my day was, and I'd just say, busy, which wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the kind of busy she was used to hearing about. I'd be sore in places I forgot I had muscles. I'd crash into bed at midnight and sleep like a man who was finally too tired to dream. Then came the clothes. It wasn't intentional at first. I threw out an old pair of khakis that had paint stains on the cuffs. Then a company polo I realized I hadn't worn in over a year. Then the sneakers I used to mow the lawn in. It was like shedding a skin I didn't know I hated. I bought a pair of boots. Not flashy, just clean lines, solid build, good leather. When I walked in them, they made a sound. Not loud, not cocky. Just deliberate. Like I had somewhere to be. Eventually, I stopped looking like the version of me that Emily had grown bored of. I didn't do it for her. Not even close. I did it because I'd started catching glimpses of myself in the mirror and thinking, there you are. Where the hell have you been? One night, I got invited to a rooftop bar for someone's birthday. I almost said no, the old instinct, but something stopped me. I said yes. Drove out after work. Ordered a bourbon, neat. Talked to strangers. Laughed a little. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to remember what it felt like to be around people who didn't look at me like I was a project gone stale. The bartender complimented my jacket. Some guy from a marketing firm asked if I played rugby in college. I didn't, but I didn't correct him either. It felt good not being seen but being misseen in a way that didn't shrink me. The invitations started coming more often. Happy hours, trivia nights, even an improv show one of my clients was in, which I went to, and surprisingly didn't hate. I found myself saying yes more. But not to her. Emily noticed. First, she thought it was a phase. She made a few jokes about my midlife crisis. Said it with a smile like she was in on something. But when I didn't respond, when I didn't laugh along, the smile faded. To catch her watching me now. Not with the old disdain or distance, but with curiosity. Like she was trying to figure out who I was becoming and whether or not she still had a seat at the table. But by then, something had shifted in me too. I wasn't trying to become someone new. I was unearthing the guy I used to be before I got so damn good at compromise. I started waking up before my alarm. Made real coffee instead of reheating yesterday's pot. I'd stand on the back porch in the early light, sip from an actual mug, not a travel thermos, and just breathe. The kind of slow, grounded breath that tells your nervous system it's okay now. You're not fighting for scraps anymore. I wasn't chasing freedom. I was remembering what it felt like. There was this one morning, maybe 2 weeks into the new rhythm, where I stood in front of the mirror and didn't look away, not to fix my collar, not to check for shaving nicks, just looked. And for once, I didn't see a man trying to hold his life together. I saw a man building something else. Emily never asked outright, but she knew. She felt the shift, even if she didn't understand it. There was a nervous energy in how she moved around me now, like a dancer who realized halfway through the show that the music had changed, and she was still doing the old routine. She'd linger near the doorway when I came home, throw out vague questions like, "Good day?" or "Anything new at work?" I'd give her nothing back, not out of cruelty, just because I didn't owe her anything anymore. We still lived under the same roof, technically, but it felt more like I was renting space from the ghost of a life I used to believe in. She tried a few small plays, a new dress at dinner, music playing when I walked in, something from our early days, meant to pull me back through memory. One night, she even cooked my favorite meal from scratch, candles and all, as if mashed potatoes and grilled salmon could stitch a broken thing back together. She was trying to rewind a tape I'd already burned. And the truth is, I didn't hate her. That might have been easier. But what I felt was more dangerous. I felt nothing. No longing, no nostalgia, not even anger. Just a steady sense of detachment, like I was watching her through glass. The night I left, it wasn't dramatic. There were no screams, no ultimatums, no slammed doors. I'd been planning it quietly, piece by piece, for weeks. Found a loft downtown with exposed brick, high ceilings, and quiet. The good kind. Hired a lawyer. Froze the accounts. Moved what I needed into the back of my car. She was asleep when I walked out for the last time. Or pretending to be. I didn't leave a note. Just packed my bag. Took one last look at the life I was done performing in, and closed the door behind me. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks. Felt like air. The first morning in the new place, I sat on the windowsill with a cup of coffee and watched the city wake up. No phone calls. No tension. Just the hum of traffic and a quiet I hadn't felt in years. It was strange how unfamiliar peace felt at first. Like my body didn't trust it yet. But over time, it did. I started spending my weekends riding the coast in a beat-up motorcycle I bought secondhand and fixed up myself. Something about the wind and the open road, it made things simple. Tangible. Real. I hosted quiet dinners with new friends. People who didn't know me as Emily's husband or the guy from the law firm. Just Mark. Sometimes we talked late into the night about books, bad dates, favorite cities. Sometimes we just drank wine and listened to records. I reconnected with my sister. Took my niece to her first basketball game. Watched her face light up when the home team won in double overtime and thought, this is what presence feels like. And I wrote. Not legal briefs or emails, but stories. Short ones. Nothing about love or betrayal. Just people figuring out who they are in the middle of chaos. I didn't write about Emily. Not even once. One evening, months later, I ran into someone from the firm at a bookstore. She did a double take, said I looked different. Good different, she clarified, and smiled like she didn't quite recognize me. I didn't explain. Just said, yeah, I've been editing. Emily tried reaching out once. A text that just said, can we talk? I stared at it for a while. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted to feel something. I wanted to give her the dignity of a response. But I didn't owe her closure. I owed myself a clean break. So I let the message sit there, unread, like an artifact of a past I no longer lived in. It's strange how your life can unravel in one moment and still somehow weave itself into something better. I used to think being left, being lied to, being laughed at, that was the worst of it. But the real pain was in forgetting myself long before any of that happened. Now, I don't measure time in regrets. I measure it in stillness. In mornings where I wake up without a weight on my chest. in conversations that don't feel like negotiations. In the absence of pretending, I became someone new, not to prove anything, not to show her what she lost, but because the version of me who tolerated her cruelty didn't deserve the rest of my life. And it all began the night she turned me into a joke. Some things, I've realized, aren't worth being thankful for, but some endings, they are.